Now, a group that's been getting credited and demonized for the role of electing Donald Trump is the working class, or specifically the white working class. And while many in Michigan, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and other places did end up voting for him, it's not actually the working class that is to blame for Donald Trump. Well, who is it? Who are the people that actually voted more for Trump than the white working class? Turns out it was the wealthy, the affluent. Now, there's this narrative going around, as I said, of the white working class. Everybody's talking about it. And to explain why we have this narrative, why people talk about it, and why I've even talked about it, and I was misinformed, of course, is that you only need to look at mainstream media coverage of the 2016 election to see how they were able to peddle this falsehood that Donald Trump had the majority support of working people, which he actually didn't. Now, here's some examples. The Atlantic said that the billionaire developer is building a blue-collar foundation. The Associated Press wondered what Trump's success in attracting white working-class voters would mean for the general election. Obviously, it meant nothing. On November 9th, the New York Times front page article about Trump's victory characterized it as a decisive demonstration of power by a largely overlooked coalition of mostly blue-collar, white, and working-class voters. Now, the thing is, as we've pointed out, why would the white working class, or any or just the working class in general, because black people work, Latinos work, they're part of the working class, so it's just the working class. Why would they vote for somebody who has policies that end up hurting them? Just saying. Just saying. Now, and it turns out they didn't actually vote for Trump. Now, according to the data, people who were mostly Trump voters were mostly wealthy, white, suburban, upper middle class Republicans, people who are affluent, some who are educated, as I'm going to point out later, and for most part, reliably Republican. And that's it. Reliably Republican. Now, and if you can recall that this was, and again, I covered this in the article that I talked about on on Thursday, that this demographic was a target for Hillary Clinton. These were the Romney Clinton voters. These were the center-right Republicans who were supposed to be, you know, the white suburban soccer moms that were like, oh my God, I can't believe Trump said he likes to grab pussies. I do not like that. Well, it turns out those people voted for Trump anyway. So they did not go for her. So before I get into the data, I do want to talk about why the media kept this narrative. Now, one of the examples comes from a piece in March of 2016 by the writer by the name of Thomas Frank, the writer. Now, he argued that working white class people made up the bulk of Trump's fan base. Now, he did so without any evidence. He said, well, white people, white working people, man, that's Trump's base. Do you have any evidence for that? No evidence. None. In fact, the evidence points against that. Now, many journalists did find some examples of working class Trump supporters in early campaign rallies. But, and yes, some working class people do like Donald Trump. I don't understand why, but some of them do. Or, of course, they also just hated Hillary and wanted to find out, okay, like, I got to see what the Republicans are putting up because Democrats are putting up crap. But I can't really say for certain. But what I can say for certain is that the people who supported Trump were not working class. And the journalists who spread that narrative could also not prove that. Now, the Washington Post gives us a couple of reasons why. Most 2016 polls didn't include information about how people surveyed earned a living. Well, that's kind of an important thing to know. You see, your job kind of defines your class. In most circumstances, I would believe that it would really show you where your class is at. Say you have a job as a multi-million-dollar CEO, well, we can tell what class you're in. If you're a doctor, we can tell what class you're in. If you're a line cook, well, look, there's a big difference between the CEO of a restaurant and a line cook who works in that same restaurant. So there's your example. They didn't ask that question. They just asked whether or not you support Trump. So now when journalists wrote that Trump was appealing to these working class voters, they didn't really know whether or not the Trump voters were the cooks or the CEOs. Again, super important piece of data. Now, not only that, but many polls showed that Trump supporters were mostly affluent Republicans. For example, a March 2016 NBC survey that the Washington Post analyzed showed that only a third of Trump supporters had household incomes at or below the national median of about $50,000. Another third made $50,000 to $100,000, and another third made $100,000 or more. So 2/3 made over the median income in America. Now, the Washington Post continues. If being white working class means that being in the bottom half of the income distribution, the vast majority of Trump supporters during the primaries were not working class. Period. Now, they get into education, and they talk about education. Remember, Donald Trump, he loves the poorly educated, right? Well, they went into, okay, well, normally you would think that somebody with a higher income is more highly educated. Well, it turns out that's not necessarily the fact. It turns out there are a lot of people making $100,000 or more who don't have a college education. Interesting, right? Now, as far as Trump voters went, in the primary, well, they looked at how many Trump voters had an education because they assumed that with with lower amounts of education, you would have lower amounts of income. Again, that's not quite true. Now, for Republicans, about 71% of Republicans who voted did not have a college education. 70% of Trump's voters also did not have a college education. So that's very interesting. So, yes, he got a large share of the uneducated vote. So those people, again, they go for Republicans. So Donald Trump normally got what, as far as the educated vote goes, he got the same as a normal Republican would. For example, he got about the same as Mitt Romney did when it came to the educated vote and of the uneducated vote. So now I have to be clear here. When I say educated, not educated, I'm not saying that people who don't have a college education are dumb. Okay, there are trade schools, etc. I always have to put that out because being somebody, somebody who went to college isn't necessarily smarter than somebody who hasn't went to college. It just all depends, right? But I am saying, as a general rule, we're just looking at college educated or not college educated. So just to be fair. Now, again, you might be thinking, well, that was in the primary. What about the general? Well, in the general, it turns out you had pretty much the same results. Recently, the American National Election Study, which is the longest running election survey in the United States, released its 2016 survey data. And that showed that in November 2016, the Trump coalition looked a lot like it did during the primaries. Well, gee, how did that Hillary Clinton strategy work out to try to get the Romney voters? Oh, right, it didn't work out because they all voted for Trump. In fact, among people who said they voted for Trump, 35% had household incomes under $50,000 per year. The figure was also 35% among non-Hispanic whites. Almost exactly the percentage in NBC's March 2016 survey. Trump's voters were not overwhelmingly poor. In the general election, like the primary, about 2/3 of Trump supporters actually came from the better off half of the survey. They were not poor. They were affluent. Even if they didn't have a college degree, even if they weren't educated. Now, when you talk about the people who are affluent but don't have a college degree, I need you to keep in mind that the situation economically today is different than it was before. A lot of the people who are making over $100,000 a year, or $50,000 a year, $70,000 a year, good middle class, upper middle class income, well, they're older people. Well, older people didn't necessarily have to go to college to get their degrees in order to get these good jobs. A lot of these people were able to get these jobs right out of high school and go in and stay with the company. And I know a lot of people who have done that who are older, and some of these same people are the ones that say, why don't you just get a good job? It's easy. I got a job straight out of high school, and look at me, I'm making a middle class life. Why are you working at McDonald's? Just go and do better. Stop being lazy. Well, they don't understand how that's changed. That same job where this person has been, for example, working as an engineer for 25 years, well, that now requires an engineering degree and 10 years of experience to get into that position. But again, these people don't quite understand how the modern economy works now, how a college degree and experience is required for just about anything. So, but the overall point is, poor people did not vote for Trump. According to the election study, white non-Hispanic voters without college degrees making below the median household income only made up about 25% of Trump voters. Now, these are the same people, of course, the ones who voted for Trump, I should say, that despise the working class, that despise the poor. Now, the Washington Post gives a really good example in the form of a recent National Review article about Donald Trump's support from the working class. And get this is some class warfare shit. Quote, "The white American underclass is enthralled to a vicious, selfish culture whose main products are misery and used heroin needles. Donald Trump's speeches make them feel real good. So does OxyContin. And that, the truth about these dysfunctional downscale communities is that they deserve to die." That is your National Review. That is what your average Trump supporter thinks about the working class. So before you go around and say things like, damn white working class, those are the guys who brought us Trump. No. Think again. And actually read the data. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.